The royal palace of Ixora gleamed under the light of 3 moons, its crystalline spires refracting the pale glow into thousands of dancing colors. Deep within its labyrinthine halls, Princess Zara of X, heir to the Ixoran collective, lay in isolation, her iridescent skin dulled by the ravages of the crimson pox. How much longer? The emperor demanded, his massive form dwarfing the chief physician, who trembled visibly. The contagion has reached stage 3, your luminance, the physician replied, keeping a safe distance of 20 feet as protocol demanded. Without the Stellaris orchid for the antidote, she has perhaps 2 days before her neural pathways begin to crystallize. The Emperor's bioluminescent markings flashed with rage and despair. And there is truly no one who can retrieve it? The quarantine regulations are absolute, your luminance, the royal advisor interjected. Anyone who enters the princess's chambers must remain until the contagion passes or until it doesn't. The Stellaris orchid grows only in the obsidian mists, where the atmospheric composition would dissolve Ixoran lung tissue in minutes. To send any of our people would mean certain death. And what of the foreigners in the diplomatic quarter? Surely there must be species among them with suitable physiologies. The advisor's markings dimmed. All have refused your luminance. The Vraxians cannot tolerate the cold. The Meridian delegations cited religious prohibitions. The Quantum Collective calculated the risk-reward ratio as inefficient. Even the Torellian mercenaries, who would normally attempt anything for sufficient payment, declined when they learned of the quarantine requirements. Silence fell over the royal chamber. The emperor turned away, his proud shoulders slumped in defeat. Then we must prepare for succession. Alert the High Council that… Wait. The whispered word came from an unexpected source, Kira Chen, the human diplomatic attaché, who had been quietly recording the proceedings from the corner of the room. All eyes turned to her, some blinking vertically in surprise, as if suddenly remembering her presence. Forgive my interruption, your luminance, Kira continued, giving the formal Ixoran bow, right arm extended, left palm covering her heart. But I believe I can help. The Emperor's markings pulsed with skepticism. You? A human? You understand what is required? Kira nodded. Someone must enter the quarantine, retrieve this flower from a toxic environment, and prepare the antidote. I volunteer. Impossible, the royal advisor hissed. Humans are even more fragile than Ixorans. The obsidian mists would contain sulfur compounds, methane, and nitrogen oxides that would damage Ixoran respiratory systems. Kira finished for him. But humans developed on a planet with volcanic activity. Our spacefaring protocols require enhancement treatments that allow us to tolerate a wide range of toxic environments. With breathing apparatus, I can survive the mists long enough. The Emperor studied her carefully. And the quarantine? You understand that even if you succeed, you must remain isolated with my daughter until the contagion runs its course. If she dies, you die. I understand your luminance. Why? The Emperor demanded. You barely know my daughter. Our species have only had diplomatic relations for 3 standard years. What do you gain from this risk? Kira thought of her brief encounters with Princess Zara of X during diplomatic functions, her curiosity about human culture, her intelligent questions, her vision for greater cooperation between their peoples. On Earth, we have a saying, the true measure of any society can be found in how it treats those in need. I'm simply doing what any decent person would do. Yet no one else has volunteered, the chief physician observed. Then perhaps they should reconsider their definition of decency, Kira replied quietly. The obsidian mists lived up to their name, a roiling black fog that enveloped the northern reaches of the palace grounds, created by the intersection of volcanic vents and the frigid mountain air. Kira checked the seals on her breathing apparatus once more before stepping into the poisonous boundary. The diplomatic corps survival suit she wore had been designed for emergency evacuations from hostile environments, not extended expeditions into them. She had 60 minutes of filtered air, and according to the royal botanist, the journey to find the Stellaris orchid would take at least 45. The landscape within the mists was alien and beautiful, in its desolation. Obsidian rock formations jutted like frozen waves, while pools of luminescent fungi cast an eerie blue glow through the darkness. Kira followed the botanist's map, projected onto her visor display, each step careful on the slick, glassy surface. 50 minutes later, with her oxygen reserves blinking into the red, she found it a small cluster of crystalline flowers growing from a crack in the volcanic glass. Their petals resembled delicate star patterns, glowing with an inner light that pulsed like a heartbeat. As she carefully harvested 3 of the precious blooms, securing them in the specimen container, her comm unit crackled. "Human," came the Emperor's voice, distorted by the mineral content in the air. "Your oxygen levels are critical. Return immediately." "Almost done, Your Luminance," she replied, securing the container to her belt. "Coming back now." The return journey was a blur of burning lungs and stumbling steps as her oxygen supply dwindled to its final reserves. When she finally burst from the mist's boundary, collapsing onto the palace grounds, medical staff rushed forward, then halted at a safe distance, unwilling to risk contamination. Only one figure approached without hesitation, the Emperor himself, breaking all protocol to help her to her feet. "You succeeded," he said, his voice carrying a note of wonder as he eyed the specimen container at her belt. Kira nodded, still catching her breath. Now for the hard part. Princess Zaravex's isolation chamber was a spacious but somber room deep within the palace. When Kira entered, following the chief physician's detailed instructions for preparing the antidote, she found the princess lying motionless on a platform of softly glowing crystal. Her once vibrant skin now bore red crystalline patches, the hallmark of the advanced disease. "Another doctor?" the princess murmured, her voice weak. "You look different." "I'm not a doctor," Kira replied, approaching with the prepared antidote, a shimmering liquid distilled from the orchid's essence. "I'm Kira Chen, from the Earth delegation. We met at the solstice reception last year." Recognition flickered in the princess's eyes. "The human who asked about our music." Kira smiled, surprised she remembered. "That's right. Now, I need you to drink this. It won't taste pleasant, but it should help." As the princess drank the antidote, she studied Kira with newfound clarity. "Why are you here? Where are my people?" "They can't enter because of the quarantine protocols. The atmosphere in the obsidian mists would kill them, so they couldn't retrieve the orchid needed for the medicine." "But you could," the princess realized. "And now you're trapped here with me." "Not trapped," Kira corrected gently. "Just waiting with you until you recover." Over the next 3 days, as the antidote slowly worked to reverse the crystallization process, Kira and Princess Zaravex talked. Despite their vastly different biologies and backgrounds, they discovered shared interests in stellar cartography, comparative mythology, and the universal challenges of being women in positions of power. "In my culture," the princess confided as her strength returned, showing vulnerability is considered the greatest weakness. "My people believe that needing help diminishes one's right to lead. That explains why everyone looked so uncomfortable when I volunteered," Kira mused. "In human culture, there's strength in recognizing when you need others. No one can be entirely self-sufficient." "A curious philosophy for such physically fragile beings," the princess observed, though her tone held no condescension. "Maybe we developed it because of our fragility," Kira suggested. "Humans survived because we learned to help each other." On the 4th day, the chief physician announced from the other side of the quarantine barrier that the princess had entered the recovery phase. The contagion was no longer active, though protocol required 1 more day of isolation. That evening, as they shared a meal, Princess Zaraveks made an unexpected declaration. "When I take the throne, my first act will be to reform our medical protocols." This emphasis on self-reliance at all costs has become pathological. Kira looked up in surprise. "That might face significant resistance." "Undoubtedly, which is why I'll need strong diplomatic allies." The princess's bioluminescent markings pulsed with determination. Perhaps the human delegation might support a cultural exchange initiative focused on healthcare philosophies. Kira smiled. "I think that could be arranged." 1 month later, Kira Chen stood beside Princess Zaraveks in the Grand Assembly as the Ixoran Human Healthcare Cooperation Treaty was ratified. The agreement would establish exchanges of medical knowledge, emergency response protocols, and philosophical approaches to care. "Many were surprised when I named you royal friend, the first non-Ixoran to hold such a title." The princess murmured for Kira's ears alone. "They whisper that I have been influenced by human sentimentality during my illness." "And what do you tell them?" Kira asked. Princess Zaravek's markings glowed with quiet amusement. "That perhaps a little human sentimentality is exactly what our empire needs. After all, when no one else dared to help their princess, it was a human who showed us a better way." As the assembly erupted in the musical tones of Ixoran approval, Kira reflected that sometimes the bravest diplomatic moves weren't grand speeches or strategic alliances, but simply the willingness to help someone in need, regardless of the differences between them. And sometimes, that was enough to change worlds.